Good morning. The title of my talk, Remembrance of Things Past, actually has two meanings. One is the famous line from Shakespeare's sonnet number 30, that most of you know. It's just sort of a recollection of the past, of the discovery of Memristor. And but more importantly, it's actually going to be mean in the sense of Marcel Proust's famous novel, and sure most of you know Marcel Proust has this wonderful book. This is the English title of his book, which French title is À la recherche du temps perdu. And you will see that Marcel Proust's book has a lot to do with our brain, with associated memory, and with all kinds of higher brain functions. So this has two meanings in that sense. Okay, now I want to start by showing you that all the computers that we have had so far are actually just switches. Just a switch gets faster and faster. We go up the line, and it follows the famous Moore's law all the way from 1970 to the present. And but most of you have, I'm sure, read a lot of literature which says that Moore's law is coming to an end. People have been saying this for a few years already. It hasn't ended, but finally the next slide will convince you that it is the end now, because in August 28th of last year, IEEE Spectrum has an announcement saying that Global Foundry, which is one of the largest fabrication company, halts 7 nanometer chip development. And the reason is not so much that they cannot make it, but because after installing extreme ultraviolet lithography, the foundry, Global, finds it doesn't have enough customer for it. So even though it can still actually push it, but become too expensive to be not cost effective anymore. So we're going to stop at 7 nanometer. And that's truly the end of Moore's law, okay? All right, now the problem, why is it now a crisis situation? Because all our present computers, from this biggest supercomputer to your iPhone, it's all based on the von Neumann architecture. It has hit the memory wall. This is a favorite term that people use. We essentially say that von Neumann architecture is made up really of a processing unit that's separate from the memory unit. And every time you make a simple calculation, you got to go to the memory unit, pick up the data, put it back, make the calculation, and they send it back and store again. So this turned out to be extremely inefficient. And that was the cause of the problem, because that I call it a curse. There were two curses of memory work. One is that the gross mismatch in processing, which is faster and faster because the device is faster and faster, and the shutting time, which is very slow. And in addition, people didn't realize it, that the energy for the memory access actually grows exponentially. It is not true that when it gets more and more, the energy will actually get more and more, and it grows exponentially. So those were the real severe problem. Just to show you an example, the latest example, all of you know, Google had trained the deep neural network AlphaGo 0 to defeat the world champion in the game of Go. But if you look at what exactly they use 64 GPU, 19 CPU, 4 TPU, 40 days of training, 29 million games of self-play, and 3.1 million mini batches of 2048 precision, each of parameter updates. If you calculate how much energy is consumed, this you will see is incredible. Okay, so this is the reason why we are at the end of Moore's law. And again, the reason is most time and energy are wasted in shuttling data. Most computing tasks In AI application, you hear a lot of applications yesterday about AI, deep learning, where most of them consist of machine learning operations such as object, image, and speech recognition, where most energy and time are consumed in data movement rather in computation. It turns out that most of the time wasted in shuttling data, okay? And this reminds me of the time we consume coming from the hotel to here and then go back. It turned out that most of our energy is wasted in that shuttling, going back and forth. Okay. All right. Just a summary. Conventional for Neumann architecture has this separate memory and the processing unit, and this is the memory that the literature is referring to. This is not my word. And we are going to show the Memristor-based logic memory is the future, in the sense that the processing and memory are combined together. And you will, our next speaker tomorrow will give you an in-depth description of this process. I guess Evangelos somewhere here. Okay. Now, so what can we do with the post-mortem since the more is done? Well, there are three things we can do. The first, of course, you got to dump the von Neumann architecture. It's just absolutely no longer feasible to make it any more useful. But then you will replace it with what's called in-memory computing. As I said, Evangelos tomorrow is going to give you a detail. I will just give a brief discussion today. And the most important is we are going to exploit memristors, because even in memory computing, it would not make sense unless you use memristors. So the next, I'll tell you what a memristor is, assuming that most of you didn't know about it. So a memristor, in a non-technical sense, is a two-terminal device whose resistance can be tuned to some desired value by applying a voltage signal or current signal, and which remembers its resistance after the voltage source is disconnected. In other words, it remembers its past. So it's remembrance of things past, okay? So that's what a memristor is. It has memory. And so why is this important? What are some virtues of memristor? First is this memory for free, in the sense that you don't need a battery. It's non-volatile, in other words, okay? It has very high speed. We're talking about nanoseconds. Very low power. We're talking about nanowatts. Very small. It's sub-nanometer scale. Great data retention. Great endurance. And most important, is compatible with CMOS technology. So what's been developed so far for our supercomputers can just dump on these new things, and so that is what's going to be the future, in my opinion. Okay, here's an example of, by the way, a prototype from SP that was described yesterday already, and this is called a dot product engine, where when you do learning and all kinds of machine learning, you are going to do an awful lot of dot product thing. And so far, those are done by algorithm. It's very slow, but it takes a lot of time. Now, with the Memristor, we can do this all on chip. Okay. In fact, you may not realize it already. Memristor is already implemented for about 5 years. There are hundreds of millions of memristors already incorporated. Here's an example. Fujitsu has been advertising. In fact, they've been selling that for 5 years. So is Panasonic. Every one of them has hundreds of millions, with a lot of memristors in there, and hundreds of millions have been sold already. And this is the latest advertisement it's an RE-ROM. And they advertise that you can do the idea for smart switch, smart glass, hearing aid, anything on the edge, you're going to use memristor. And this is part of the latest development from Fujitsu. And in a recent issue last year of Nature Electronics, it has a whole issue devoted to saying that memristor move analog computing closer to the edge. You're just seeing the edge. The smartwatch smart glass, hearing, these are all getting to the edge already. And in the following issue of the Nature Electronics, I was asked to give a sort of a one-page the remembrance of things past. So in how we predicted the Memristor. So for all of you, those who are interested, this is in the May 14 issue from last year. And the IEEE Computer Society asked me also to present a short history of the Memristor on the IEEE Micro. It was September of 1998, and the title, of course, is the title for my talk today. So now I'm going to start by telling you that how the Memristor gets started. How did I conceive the Memristor? Well, it started what I call a perfect storm. It turned out that in the late 50s and the early 60s, the circuit theory is undergoing a crisis situation, and that's because of a perfect storm, the occurrence of two simultaneous events. The first is the invention by Esaki, one who got the Nobel Prize for this invention, of this, it used to be called tunnel diode, or Esaki diode now, or vice versa. And so this is a brand new device that was published in 1958, and almost immediately people were trying to say, what is this device? And that was the time when I got to MIT to start my graduate school. And of course I started to see what can this do. So I put in an inductor across this device, and I put an initial condition and make an analysis, see what is going to happen when you have a negative resistance slope like that. And I was so shocked that I turned the switch on at T0. I found out that, say, after 1 second, there is no more solution. It just stopped. It's not a matter of incorrect. It's just no solution. I was quite shocked. So at that time, by the way, one reason I went to MIT is because the most famous circuit theory, the father of circuit theory, is Ernst Gilliman, Professor Gilliman, and he's at MIT. So I went to consult him. I say, I'm getting something that doesn't make sense and that has no solution. And of course, he's staring at me and he say, of course you are wrong. You know, you put this device, go to the lab, put it in inductor and see if it has no solution. Doesn't make sense. Well, it turned out that Professor Gilliman didn't realize that there's a difference between the model and the real device. It turned out that the real device, this actually happened. If you were a mathematician, to say that you have an equation, a differential equation that has no solution is perfectly all right. No solution is a valid solution, okay? But for engineers like us, it doesn't make any sense. So that was the first storm that people started. I asked everybody in MIT, nobody has an idea how to overcome the situation. So that was the first storm. The second storm that this even worse is shortly after Esaki diode was invented, many other devices, I'm going to show you a sample of them, were quickly announced. I call this a Cambrian explosion of the devices. So, and every one of them has its own name. Memristor, liquid, Solion, liquid, tunnel resistor, background. It all have this strength, they're all nonlinear. Okay, that's the point. Here's another 5 of them with 5 strange names and 5 different nonlinear curves, and here's another 5 of them, or 4 of them. So the problem now is all of a sudden you have an explosion of so many new devices that people didn't know how to handle. Okay, and at that time when I arrived at MIT, there were courses introduced just for specific devices. For example, there were courses of direct current DC machine. There were courses of AC machines. There's a course on vacuum tubes. There's a course on triodes, and then when the transistor was invented, they started to introduce course of transistors. So I suddenly realized that I was very depressed. I realized that there are so many, there are about 25 of them devices. You're going to take a course for every device. How am I ever going to understand how to use these devices? So this is the two storm that all of a sudden dawned upon me that something is wrong. So the crisis circuit theory means that the pre-1970 definition of the three-circuit element that everybody knows is from high school on, that there are 3 basic circuits called capacitor, resistor, inductors. Unfortunately, they give unrealistic or sometimes even incorrect solution when elements are time varying or nonlinear. So that is the problem. Okay. So these are the three classic circuit elements. Capacitor is definition. Everybody knows that. Capacitor, resistor, inductor. But it turns out that even Feynman, in his famous book in 1963, about time, didn't even realize what are basic circuit elements. So I just quote a sentence from page 612 of this famous book. He said, the coefficient of proportionality is called the capacity. And such a system of two conductors is called the condensers. That's how Feynman thought of a capacitor. So now there is no unification, no general agreed terminology. So to recover from the third perfect storm, capacitor resistor inductor had to be redefined via what I call an axiomatic approach. And the reason is that all results derived from an axiomatic will have to be timeless. You will never have to go back and say we got to repel it. Okay, so this is how I started the axiomatic approach. So my axiomatic approach simply we start with voltage and current as the undefined concept. You simply take it, there's such a thing called voltage and a current, and I use the standard symbol. And once we have done, of course, you can integrate the current, and I call it a charge. You could call it anything else. You can integrate the voltage and call it flux because it's already called a flux. So these are the four fundamental circuit variables. Two of them already derived from the axiom of. So these are the only two axioms. And now, given an arbitrary two-terminal device, I look at these four basic variables: voltage, current, charge, and flux. And I say that they exist devices such that if you connect here, where the voltage and current will then be constrained to always relate. So these are the four basic variables. Okay, so I say that what if a two-terminal device where the voltage and current always related by a single valued function? In that case, that device is going to be called a resistor. With this definition, you can see that all of the 35 or so devices, they're all resistors, in fact. Okay, in the spatial case where the VI can be straight line, then you have Ohm's law. So this is how we define the correct way to define resistor. But there are devices that which is the current and the flux that is related by a relation, a continuous curve, and under that's called an inductor. And when that curve is a straight line, you recover the standard definition. Conversely, there are devices that relate between the voltage and charge, in general nonlinear. But when that curve is a straight line, it becomes the ICdVdt. So these are the three classic elements that's now defined properly. Okay, but once you look at this diagram, you immediately realize that if my axiom makes sense, is correct, then there's got to be something missing here, and so there is a missing link. And what is that missing link? That missing link is called the Memristor. Okay, that's where it came from, and I'm not going to spend a lot of time going through detail, except that Memristor therefore is a curve in the flux versus charge plane, and the slope, of course, is just the resistance. The only difference from an Ohm's law is that it's nonlinear, and that the resistance changes as you move along this curve. So Memristor is in fact defined just by Ohm's law as well, except that the M of Q is not a constant. It depends on the path. It has memory, in other words. Okay, so that's how you would think of a Memristor for today's lecture. And Memristor, by the way, is just a synonym for memory resistor. Okay, that's where the name came from. So when I developed this concept, I published it in a paper in 1971, and of course I actually built, as a proof of concept, I actually built the device using op-amps. I remember the whole thing occupies about a box of a standard off-the-shelf component, and I have two wires coming out. But of course inside I have op-amps, so I need batteries. But I put the whole thing in the box with two wires coming out, it will exactly behave like a Memristor. It's a proof of principle. But no one is interested in it. Of course, a real device had to be no battery, right? So for 1971 on, for many years, nobody has found a device that fits the definition. By the way, my definition of a chemical element is exactly like Mendeleev. In the first Mendeleev table of chemical element published in 1869 in Russian, there were gaps, missing gaps. And now today we know, of course, know that that one is called a gallium, this is called a germanium, that's called a scandium, the whole table is all filled. That's the same situation with the Memristor. It took 37 years, exactly 2008 from 1971, when finally a group of HP under Dr. Stanley Williams published a paper in Nature called The Amazing Memristor Found. This paper is the one who attracted all kinds of attention because it's a front page newspaper, and this is how Memristor became known. Okay, all right. So it was published in Nature, and one of the things I analyzed in my paper showed that a Memristor, if you plug it in a VI cup, you put it in a sine wave, and voltage and measure the current, and trace it in a VI plane, you are not going to have a single curve, but you will always get a curve. Curve can be very complicated, but it has always have to go through the origin. I call that a pinch hysteresis loop. This is, in fact, the best way to think of a Memristor. Okay. In the SP, just the day before the newspaper came out, that was May 1st, SP has a press conference, and in that press conference, Dr. Stanley Williams showed off with this array of Memristor, and each of these Memristor is 17 nanometer. It's already very small, 17 nanometer, which is smaller than the smallest known virus. The smallest known virus was 25 nanometer. So with that, already in 2008, it has the cell density of 100 gigabits per square centimeter. So that was the reason why there was so much excitement. And as I said, there are many papers, immediate people all jump in, and there are different Memristor published already. As of 2015, 13, there's an 8 nanometer Memristor from Professor Chua from University of Massachusetts, and 2015 is now even a two-dimensional Memristor, and so getting smaller and even reduced the dimension. There's even a press conference in Germany, Karlsruhe Technology, where a single one molecule Memristor was announced. This molecule has 52 atoms. So there are many Memristors has since been discovered. In fact, the latest one from Professor Shell, I was told that they have already just published a 2 nanometer Memristor. And he told me that, in fact, he's nearing to get a 1 nanometer Memristor. The only problem is there is no instrument to be able to measure it at such a small size. So in other words, Memristor is truly a sub-nanometer device, and it is exactly the device that you are going to need to go to exascale computing. Okay, so but without going through the detail, the best way for you to think of a Memristor is if you have a device and you say, maybe this is the Memristor, how do you know that? It's very simple. I have an experimental definition, namely, I have an experimental definition simply that you make this, put it in a sine wave, and measure the current, plug it in the VI plane. If it's pinch, it's a Memristor. It has to be, of course, for all different amplitude and frequency. It has to always go through the origin. That's the best way to think of what a Memristor is without any additional background material. Okay, now it turned out that all non-volatile memories based on resistant switchings are Memristors. Until now, all computers, including the supercomputer and iPhone, all use the high voltage or low voltage as a state, high voltage and low voltage. Well, from now on, in the future, it's not going to be voltage, it's going to be resistance. It will be high resistance or no resistance. That will be the information bit. Okay. All right. So now notice I say that all non-volatile memories, because there are many, and they are made from many different materials. Okay. So, for example, They come in different names like RE-ROMs, M-ROMs, CB-ROM, phase-change memory, ferroelectric memory, atomic memory, and there are more. They're all memristors. Why? Because they're all using resistance as the bit, okay? And they all have pinch hysteresis loops. So there are many materials that you can use, in fact, to make memristors. As you can see, you can use metal oxides, conducting polymers, ferroelectric, perovskite, manganite, even spin top magnetic layers. And here's a picture of the periodic table. More than 50% of the elements have been used to make memristors. So to show you that memristor is not a single device, memristor is a concept, and there are many different ways to make memristors. Okay, just to project into the future, many people believe that non-volatile nano memristors will eventually replace the following conventional memories in our future flash memories. DRAM, hard drive, are all going to be replaced by memristors. Okay. And it's been estimated that by next year, the non-volatile memory index is going to be a $400 billion industry. This is just, of course, a rough estimate. HP had actually published a paper in Nature, which shows that you can have a three-dimensional cube of memristors and very effective way of addressing them. And with only about, I believe, 10 layers, you can store the entire Library of Congress, 21 million volume or 10 terabytes, all in the one little cube, at least in principle. And since the announcement of the Memristor Nature paper, the number of citations or the number of paper has grown exponentially. So you can see there's a great deal of interest in this fast-moving area. Now, it turned out that the quest for building nanoscale solid-state devices actually went back even from 1939 already. And how do I know that they're membrane? Well, because in 1930 a paper was published, and they found it has memory, and the author actually, I didn't know how he got it, but because in 1939 there were no professional oscilloscope. But this is clearly a picture, and it's pinched. So we can say that in 1939 we already have a memristor, even the author didn't know about it. In 1963 there was again a pinched loop, so these are all about non-volatile memory, but the author didn't know what the device is. So it's a pinch, so it's a memristor. And in the same year, another paper, again, is pinch. You can see it's pinch here, so it's a memristor. And there are many more papers. You can see all of them has pinch loop that has been published since the SP paper. And even the first radio, which uses a cat whisker, actually is a memristor because it has a pinch loop. Okay. Now, most people interested in binary memory for memristor prefer to plot this in the log of I plane. And if you put a log, of course, 0 becomes negative infinity, and this becomes flip up. So you get something that looks like this. And I call this a gold wing hysteresis loop. So there are two ways to correct a memristor. Either you have a linear scale, it's a pinch loop, or you have a log vortex plane, you would have a gold wing. And of course, the reason for a gold wing is clear. It looks like a gold wing. So that is the two signatures of memristors. Here's an example to show you that there are indeed all kinds of material you can make memristor. Here's a paper published in 2012, and you can see that there is a pinch loop all in the log plane, semi-log plane. You have the gold wing loop. These are the two signatures. They're completely equivalent. Okay, and it's interesting that even there's a paper even in 1915 where they use actually egg yolk. And you can see this is a gold wing curve. But among all these papers, there is one that stands out. That was a paper, in fact, even before the HP paper, year 2000, a paper from a group of authors from IBM. Here the author published this paper that's very influential, And you can see, but they didn't know what's a memristor, but they did have a fingerprint which shows a memory is pinch, okay? But I want to emphasize, I'm going to blow up two sentences so you can see the state of the art in 2000, what IBM scientists think this device is. First of all, they found that you can switch the resistance from a low to high by putting a process, a negative voltage pulse of 2 milliseconds, switches the system into the low impedance state. And after that, if you now reverse from negative to positive voltage pulse of 2 milliseconds, the information written in the device is erased and high impedance is recovered. So it shows that you can switch with pulses, positive and negative pulses. But more interestingly, there's a sentence here inserted. It says that faster switching speed, that is shorter write and erase pulses, as used here, are also possible, but require higher voltage amplitude. Now we're saying they observed that you can switch faster means shorter pulses by making the pulse higher. It turns out that all of these phenomena are universal, as I've just proved in a paper in Applied Physics, just published last June. If you're interested, all of this phenomena that is not known until now is completely predicted. It is true not for one memristor or two, but for all memristors. Okay. All right. Now, the reason, by the way, I say that this paper, among many others, stand out is because for first, the author, one of the co-authors, Bednos, as many of you know, is the Nobel Prize winner for high-temperature superconductors. And when people saw Nobel Prize as one of the co-authors, they realized this is something that people have to pay attention on. It is this paper that, in more than anything else, that led to all kinds of research. Okay, and as recent as 4 years, 2015, there was a paper that summarized what's going on. It shows that the secret, this is using, the secret of using pulses. How do you know? Why is it that they use pulses and you can switch? Okay, no one knows, and even this was still, as of 3 years ago, nobody knows why. Okay, and this is now completely explained. Okay, all right. Now, there are two missed opportunities. In fact, as I said, the official announcement of Memristor is the SP paper 2008, even though my paper is published in 1971. But already in the same year, I didn't realize until after the SP paper, and I go back and look at Richard, I found one, the Japanese paper, and it's interesting that the author realized the importance of a memory. It's something that goes through the origin. In the title, this is the title paper, okay? It's a polarized letter 8. So this is letter 8, which may go through origin, a memory. In other words, it was already realized that memory has a special characteristic. They just didn't know it was a new device. And even more interesting is 1973 Nobel Prize of Physics went to Josephson. And Josephson, in this paper, shows this three element, capacitor, resistor, and a nonlinear inductor I equal to sine of phi 1 without the thing. And this is what's known in the literature. When Bella built this, the Josephson junction, this was the model they used. But when Josephson got his Nobel Prize, he published another paper. He said that he had actually skipped another element because that there's another current that's due to quasi-particle pair interference. It's a quantum mechanical effect. It's very small, so he said he's just neglected. But he said, now that I got Nobel Prize, I want to be complete. So he put in this paper. He said there is another element. He didn't know what it is, but he says it obeys Ohm's law, except that the resistance is not a constant. Well, we now know that that is a memristor. So I can now say that the fourth element of the Josephson junction, the model, the Josephson junction, is now these four elements. So that was an interesting result, that a very simple circuit that has all four basic elements. Okay, now I'm going to show you some application to show that memristors is not just for memory. Okay, so here's an example of a serial full
adder, CMOS, it requires about 50 transistors to make such a full adder. Well, it turned out that it would need only 10 memristors to do exactly the same thing. So in other words, this not only make things smaller, but of course the energy is shaped. So because as you get smaller, it's the energy that becomes a severe problem because it grows exponentially. So that's one example, but I want to show you another example. This is a paper published in Advanced Material by Professor Wu. He put my name only because he has consulted me to verify that it is a memristor. So what this Professor Wu, for this work, he was awarded the prize from President Obama. And what is this device? Well, this is a device made of vanadium dioxide, and this is a coil, two identical coil with a basket here, and you can imagine what's going to happen if you put this a 4-volt DC battery. Suddenly this is going to torque. So this is why it's called a memristor motor. The motivation for this research in Berkeley is for microsurgery or for transducers, in micro dimension, and it turned out that this Professor Wood want to know if this is the memristor. I said, well, if it spins, so he went and make the measurement, it spins. So we know that is a memristor. This is a remarkable paper because it is about 1,000 times more powerful than a human muscle. So a future robot that's going to play tennis is going to beat everybody else because it's 1,000 times more powerful. Okay, it can catapult object 50 times heavier than itself. It can catapult object 5 times its straight length, faster than the blink of an eye. I'm going to show you a video. You can see here. This is a video. So show you that it's a motor. Okay, micro explosion. Okay. So now it turned out that Professor Wood, postdoc, went in and made an analysis. So he scaled up the micron-sized memristor into the size of a turbine of a 777. And the 777 had the following characteristic. It has a power density of 9 kilowatt per kilogram and 10,000 RPM. After he scaled up their memristor, Professor William Memristor found out that it's got 5 times, almost 5 times more power density, 39 kilowatt per kilogram, and 20 times high speed, 200,000 RPM. So this is quite a remarkable device. I will show this because memristor is not just for memory. I show you already several other applications. Now I'm going to show you interesting picture here. You can see this is a she snail. It's about this long, okay, and he's wearing a Nobel Prize medal here. This is called appreciation. The reason is when you become a Nobel Prize winner, you're asked to give a lecture. And when Professor Kandel received his Nobel Prize in 2000, in this famous book, this picture is from that book, his first slide that he showed when in his Nobel lecture is that picture. And he said, I would not have gotten this Nobel Prize without this clumsy snail. So I want to show you how he got the Nobel Prize. Well, this is snail, and the snail has a gill for breathing and a siphon to take the air in. This is life. So anything that's life-threatening, it will immediately withdraw because it's to save the organ. So Dr. Kandel has the good sense of performing this experiment. He just put in some sensors here, and a sensor in the master part. So he expected that when you touch this thing is going to withdraw. There must be a signal, action potential, and that signal will go to the master with another signal and would contract. So this is exactly, of course, what happened. And Kandel made 15 such measurements. He only showed 5 of them that I color code here. And he showed that the amazing thing, of course, is that, as expected, action potentials are always identical. So you have identical input. When you measure the output, where the master is, you would expect identical output, but he was shocked. For the same input, the output kept getting smaller and smaller. And that was, of course, the Ablisha, or I call it the snail, or escargot when I go to a French lecture. The escargot actually learned that after surviving the first shock that it's not so dangerous after all, because it takes immense amount of energy for the snail to generate this withdrawal. Okay, this is the most elementary form of learning. It's called habituation. Every next experiment he gets less and less, because he gets to realize he keeps learning that is not as important. So that is the first form of learning, and to show you now that you can have a memristor that will do exactly the same thing. The memristor has a simple curve like that, and these are the identical inputs, and this is the output. You see, for the same memristor, same input, all square portion, the output can keep decreasing exactly like what Kandel has. So I've just shown you that a memristor is in fact it's a synapse, in other words, okay? And the slope of is what it is. So when you learn anything, you are essentially tuning along the slope, because the slope are the concentration of neurotransmitters. Okay. Now synapses therefore are memristors, and they are. So I'm showing all those synapses are they're tiny, and there is the axon. Okay. Now notice that the memristor is a tiny proportion of the size of the body. And the reason why we don't have a brain-like computer today is because people who try to build neurons, the size of the circuit, the real estate it takes to make a synapse is about the same size it takes to make the body. That's obviously totally unacceptable. Now we know the memristors are tiny, even down to 1 nanometer. We now have the component to build brain-like computers. Okay. All right. Now here's another example. In fact, in the same 2 years later after my paper, there are two biologists in 1973. They are now famous for inventing LTP, which is for TPFC. I mean, all this learning thing now is based on LTP. And of course, they didn't realize it. But in 1972, 2 years after my paper, they published a paper where they had an experiment. And the experiment is the following. They put in a pulse here and measured the response somewhere down the line, and found that they said this is a volt, and the current is half a milliampere. Okay. Then they had the intuition that maybe they can prime it, so they put in a sequence of identical pulses, okay, to prime it, and then they repeat the experiment. Now, if this were an ordinary system, of course, there has nothing to do after you prime it, so what? You should expect the same answer. But then they were shocked that by the time they switched back and repeat experiment, they got a much bigger one. So what they observed is the exact opposite of what Kandel found. And this is now well known as the LTP phenomena. And we now know that can be simulated. By the way, they also reported very interesting. It's exactly what Bert knows from the IBM papers say that, wait a minute. Bert knows that say that thinner pulses, but with large amplitude will produce exactly the same effect. He's reporting exactly the same effect in the brain. And the reason now, of course, is obvious. In my paper, I show they're exactly the same thing. Okay, this follows. Once you have a memristor, you're going to have this property. This is called long-term potentiation. And I have a memristor here. Show that with this memristor, you apply a single pulse, you get a small output. You prime it with the pulses, you will get a much bigger output. That's because the conductance keep decreases. The current would keep increasing. So this is an example of memristor that perform the LTP function. Here is an example, Pavlov, with this famous dog, and many of you, of course, have known about this famous experiment. You have a dog, and you now try to associate the behavior. You have two kinds of stimulus. Food, when you show the dog a piece of steak, it salivates because evolution see to it that the saliva contains enzymes to digest the meat. But when Pavlov show only the ring of the bell, another kind of stimulus, the dog is indifferent, it doesn't respond. But Pavlov got his Nobel Prize because he had a good sense of performing the experiment. He first showed the meat, the dog started salivating, and he followed immediately with the ring of a bell. And shortly after that, maybe an hour or 2 hours later, he repeats the experiment. He rings the bell without any meat. The dog salivates. That's the first example of associated memory. And that's what you see all over in Marcel Proust's book on associated memory. And that was the title of his book, Remembrance of Things Past. Okay. Now, a group from China under Professor Miao and his main postdoc Yi published a paper just recently, Advanced Electronics. Again, they put my name in because they consulted me on whether it's a memristor, and I say, if it's pinch, it's a memristor, and of course it's pinch. So this is the paper. This is a very simple. This is not a simulation. They actually built devices. This is a real memristor, and but with 2 resistors, and the first input is for the bell. When there is the bell, there will be an input signal pulse. When there is a piece of meat, there is a second voltage source, and this will be the output. So the solution is first. This is not the real circuit measurement. When there is when only food, there's an output because the dog salivates. When there's only the sound of the bell, no food, there was no output. And then when Professor Miao ring the bell with a pulse and the food with the same pulse, and found that, of course, expected the output. And then subsequently, when there are no food but just the bell, nevertheless there are output. It's the exact replication of showing that a single memristor can do it. Okay, I'm a little bit out of time, so I'm going to skip. It turns out that Amoeba also can be emulated with a memristor, but I want to move on quickly. This is the important experiment by Hodgkin and Huxley. This is another famous. It turned out that there were 2 famous circuits that received Nobel Prize. The first one is the Josephson. This is the Hodgkin-Huxley. Now, in this famous paper, this is by the way, a wonderful paper that even today is still the basic paper that everybody, physiology, would study, because it has not lost everything they talk is correct, except one thing. Hodgkin actually was able to show this model of the nerve axon, and they say it's made of these 3 batteries, the sodium, potassium, and chlorine, and a capacitor, and the resistor. They all give their value. These are all experimental result. But they said they got 2 resistors, which unfortunately they cannot give you, say, it's 25 ohm or 50 ohm, because the value changes over time. And the way you calculate it is they figured out a differential equation. That's how they got a Nobel Prize. It's an empirical result. And that differential equation allowed them to calculate how this varies. It turned out that this is exactly, it is the best model that still stands the test of time. But unfortunately, Hodgkin and Cole, Cole, by the way, is one of the famous scientists that many people felt, he's an American, was very upset when they felt that he should have shared the Nobel Prize, because they actually made use of the experimental setup he did. Anyway, Cole, there was a controversy in the sense that they make small signal measurement, and they found that with this model, they would measure something like 1 or 2 Henry. So 1 Henry is a huge amount of thing in inductance. So in a famous book by Cole, after the Hodgkin-Huxley Nobel Prize came out, he said that the suggestion of an inductive reactance anywhere in the system, in the brain, was shocking to the point of being unbelievable. No one can believe that. How can the Hodgkin-Huxley model have such a big inductance? And the reason is because they were thinking of inductance. See, I'm holding a 1 Henry inductance. And the Hodgkin-Huxley model would predict you would need actually something even bigger than that for every axon. Okay, so we now know that the solution of that is of the controversy is published in my paper, and I showed that the time varying, the 2 time varying conductors in Hodgkin are actually memristors, and with this, nothing is changed. It's just that recognizing that these are memristor, everything is resolved. Okay, so we now know that synapses are memristors. axons are memristors, and therefore brains are made of memristors. The memristors are the right stuff for making brain-like computers. Okay, and I'm going to be running out of time, so I just want to maybe I should show you one slide. Okay. If you now have a string of the Huxley model with the memristors, you are going to get action potentials that propagate down the axon. Okay. So, in the interest of time, I'm going to move on. If you now put this Huxley in a three-dimensional cube, which is what I'm doing now, you are going to see the following. Imagine a small part of your brain. It's a tiny cube of your brain, but every axon is a Huxley model with its action potentials. What you get is what's called scroll waves. No one knows today what's the physiological meaning of this, but there were all kinds of conjectures. But one thing is known, which is a negative one. If you have, for patients that have epilepsy, this would trigger epilepsy. There was a negative aspect, but there were people, psychologists, who believed that the geniuses are operating in a situation like this. When you dream, when you come up with some discovery, this is the kind of signal that the brain generates. Okay, now I want to show you an interesting thing. Another interesting is this. This is Venus Flytrap. This is the important effect that if you touch any part of this, it will immediately close. And when you have an insect, it will trap the insect, and that becomes a dinner. Okay, and I want to show you that okay. You see, this is the reaction. See, touching that it take it will close immediately. Now, why is this relevant? Well, it's relevant because it turns out that is a memristor. The Venus Flytrap is a memristor, and it has since been intensely studied. And in 2011, there's a famous paper that came out and showed that the effect of this huge contraction is like a motor. You know, it turned out that this would generate action potential, and that is in fact an ion channel. If you look at the name of these authors, you will recognize Erwin Neher, one of the co-authors. That's him, another Nobel Prize winner. It's very interesting that we have all these Nobel Prize winners with this famous work, all come in contact with memristor without realizing it. What we have here is, in fact, another memristor. Okay? All right. Now I want to move on. My last picture is a true story that I want to tell in my talk. With a true story. Imagine you are in the beginning of the 1800s, okay? And London is already a progressive society. There are street lights already, and but they are from gases. So the citizens there, the bourgeois, they became demanding. Say, why couldn't the scientists use electricity and make this into light electric bulb and get rid of those fumes, those smokes? And soon enough, Sir Humphrey Davy, who was a chemist, he was, by the way, the one who discovered the missing element like sodium, potassium. Remember, in the periodic table has a lot of gaps, sodium and potassium, one of them. He discovered them, okay? But he was a real genius. He figured out that if he can put two electrodes and put in high voltage means 5,000 volts. They would generate a pulse, a spark, and if you put the whole thing in a vacuum, you should get straight light. That's in fact how our street lights now have, okay? But in his time, how can you get 5,000 a volt to demonstrate his experiment? Well, it turned out that the year, exactly the same year, 1 year after, 1801, Volta, that's how we have volt. We have, 100 volt, the volt from Volta. He discovered this called voltage pile, and if you can initially by just put them on top of each other, you can have any voltage you want. That's how Davy carried out his experiment. And I'm out of time, so I also have demonstrated. We repeated, Professor Xu at University of Hong Kong repeated this experiment and verified the experiment is correct. And they found out it's a memristor, it's a pinch loop. Okay, so that is a memristor. But what I want to show you in this end my story is this interesting true story. Napoleon, as some of you may not realize, is aside from being a great general, he's also a great fan of science. So when he heard about this this bulb that Sir Humphrey Davy made with this huge spark, he said that he should be awarded what's called the Prix Napoleon. At that time, there were no Nobel Prize yet. This is, in fact, the most prestigious one. But that was in 1808 when he knew about this. He said he should get this prize. But in 1808, France was exactly at war with England. The harbor are all blockade. But Napoleon, being a great fan of science, said, we got to give this prize this year's prize to him. So he found an attaché from the French embassy in Hong Kong, that knew London very well, and give him a whole bunch of a gold coin, because French franc wouldn't be useless. So take this gold coin, go to London, look up Davy, ask him to come to Paris to claim the prize. So this gentleman from the embassy was ready to leave already when Napoleon turned out to be a very sentimental person. He said, "Oh, wait a minute. This is such an important event. We got to invite his wife, Lady Jane. He's a sir, so the wife become a lady. We must invite ladies to come along. Okay, here's more gold, another double gold. Take this. Invite Jane to come as well. Ladies Jane come that way. So this guy, the embassy person, was already on the horse, right? And he suddenly said, "Stop! We got to make this trip comfortable for them. We got to let him hire a servant. Here's more gold coin. Go ask him to hire a servant to carry luggage and do everything to make them comfortable." So the whole thing proceeded as planned. The embassy person got hold of Davy, gave him all the gold coin, bring him to London, and everything was done as well. So it was a successful plan. But why am I telling you this thing? Well, I wanted to ask you, who do you think that servant is that carry luggages? Does anybody have a feeling who that might be? Well, he is Faraday. It was Faraday, And this is interesting because we now have the four basic circuit element, and Faraday, of course, was the inventor of inductor. So these are the four. And so Davy actually in the first person to build a memristor. Okay, well, with this, I end my talk and be happy to answer questions. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much for an exciting lecture, and we have a time for questions or comments. Everything is clear.
Any question? Yes.
Would you be able to tell more about this dot product?
The dot product engine.
And maybe other sort of analog memory store-based computing equipment.
Okay, so we'll go back. that product engine, by the way, is from Dr. John Paul Stocken from HP, and it's not yet on the market. That's why it's called prototype. So that is the product, and HP is not the only company. The other company, they're all working their tail off to make this, because that product engine is the essential, the essential component if you are going to do deep learning, machine learning. All of them require doing vector.product or even matrix.product. And right now, these are all done by software. That's why you see this GPU and all this machine that Google had to use. This is the bottleneck. And so you can understand why you need a chip that will do that and that uses it. The only way you can do that is to use Memristor. And why is that? It turns out that Memristor never calculates. It doesn't make a single multiplication. But it does multiplication, but it uses nature to multiply. And why? Well, because it's Ohm's law. Ohm's law is a constant times the voltage. The ohms can be adjustable, it's tunable. And the voltage is also tunable, and it's a product. So whenever you have Memristors, you automatically get multiplication for free, okay? Because it's Ohm's law. Nature makes the multiplication. That's why it is so fast, okay? And in fact, I was just going to, I was looking at the program for tomorrow, and Paul Messina is going to give a beautiful talk. The title is Why Topology is Necessary at Exascale and Why It's Not Easy. If I had known about this title, I would have changed my title to Why Memristor is Necessary at Exascale and Why It Is Not So Difficult. Okay. Yeah.
Stan Williams speculated that the nature of his prototype, the action of his Memristor was drift of oxygen vacancies in disordered titanium dioxide. Could you comment also about that, whether it was confirmed?
I'm sorry, I missed the question.
When Stan Williams built his Memristor,
Stan Williams,
he postulated that the functioning of this device was due to drift of oxygen vacancies caused by the potential difference.
Right.
Could you comment also on that?
Well, you can ask the question, how can a resistor change its value by just a pass? You just put in some signal, it's going to change the pass. Well, it turned out, because the only way you can change the resistor to some value is that some structure has to change. The same thing in our brain. How do we learn? We learn by, like the Apricia, the escargot. When it learns, can they find out that there are new proteins that are grown? In fact, there are new synapses that are grown. So the structure is actually changed. Okay, we didn't realize, and that's why he got a Nobel Prize. Same with, a Memristor, even though it's a resistor, but when you apply voltage, the internal structure actually change. Okay, and that's the reason. Now, since I have a few more minutes, in fact, you might find it interesting to show you one more example that I had skipped. This is an interesting example. So I'm going to. Okay, what you're seeing here is an amoeba. Okay, the amoeba, by the way, is the most primitive thing, and it doesn't even have a brain. Okay. And why are we interested in amoeba? It will turn out that amoeba, crawl very slow, about 1 centimeter per hour at room temperature. And as I say, it doesn't have a brain, but it has a mind. Means that it has some intelligence. Okay. So there's a famous experiment by a group of Japanese scientists a few years back, and this is the setup that they built. There is this. They build a one-dimensional conveyor so that the amoeba is going to move on a straight line. And that way, they can put cameras to register because they're very slow. It takes an hour to crawl maybe a few centimeters, right? So they're going to everything have to be automated, but then they can track how the amoeba moves, okay? Now it turned out that amoeba is very interesting. It moves, we know it moves very slow, but it only moves when you are at room temperature, about 26 degrees. When you're at the temperature, the amoeba start to move, but very slow, but it moves. But if you bring down the temperature by just as much as 3 degrees, from 26 to 23, the amoeba stop. Just refuse, would not move, okay? It's just like a human, you know. We're all moving here, but if you put me and bring me to the North Pole, or to you to North Pole, you're not going to move too, right? It's that kind of situation. So this is the experiment, and the result of this experiment is following. This is an hour. So this is when it moves, this is the speed. When you're on top, the speed. When you are below, it's not moving. So you can see that when the scientists, Japanese scientists, put in a 3 degree, from 26 to 23, the amoeba suddenly, they're moving. You see the blue is moving. And suddenly at this 3 degree, they froze, stop. And then after 1 hour later, shortly after they started to recover, so they might begin to move again. But 1 hour later, the scientists put in another pulse. 3 degrees later, and the amoeba freeze, stop. And then it begin to recover, but 1 hour later, the amoeba, another 3 degree drop, the amoeba freeze. Now the interesting thing is, the amoeba actually learns that if you have only 2 pulses, you couldn't tell you're periodic, right? But if you have 3, then you know you are periodic. When you have 2, okay? So the amoeba calculated already how much time is this in between. So by the time in the 4th period, the scientist didn't put another pulse. It stayed at room temperature. But the amoeba stopped. So the amoeba has learned. It doesn't have a brain, but it has learned. It has learned a period. Is quite amazing. And after 6 more hours, it began to move. And then when at that time, at this time, few hours later, another 3 degree drop, the amoeba stopped. And then after that, it doesn't move again. I mean, it's 3 degrees, but the amoeba continue to expect that this periodic phenomena. So this has been emulated by a group professor at UC San Diego with 1 memristor and an inductor and capacitor. I don't have to go into details. I want to get the conclusion. Are amoeba intelligent? Doesn't have a brain, right? Well, let's go down to think about the dawn of civilization. Let's go to Egypt at the dawn of civilization. This is Nile River, okay? And it turns out that discerning a periodicity is not easy at all. You think about it, because even for humans, because for example, when the ancient Egyptians recognized the regular periodicity of the flooding of the river Nile and succeeded in anticipating the next flood, because they realized it's periodic. This breakthrough triggered the invention of the calendar and was a symbol of dawn of civilization. Well, today we think of calendar as something trivial. Well, it's not so trivial. You go back 6,000 years. The primitive people don't know what periodicity is. The amoeba already knew, okay? So you can see that it can say they're intelligent. Well, there are other examples that I'm out of time, so I won't show it to you. But again, you know, maybe a few more minutes. Any other questions?
Okay. I don't see any questions, so if not, there is one. Okay.
So you're starting to build these memristors. Now, how long will it take? You know, prediction, we're looking into the future before we can integrate them with current circuits.
How long will it take what?
Or shall we just have these circuits totally separate? Can we put them on the same die, or do we need to have different dies? You know, what does it take to make them useful and for supercomputing?
Oh, well, I mean, all these real products, you know, this is just details, okay? And of course, the devil is the details, but that's how you make money, okay? And you can scale it, and okay? But like Paul is going to say tomorrow, you know, topology is necessary. I'll tell you, topology is necessary. And if you want to go to exascale, you're going to need memristors, okay?
Okay, I think we should continue. So thank you very much for exciting lecture.